Let's go straight to Caro, because Caro has always got the latest on any issue going on in the footy world. So what's the latest, Caro?
Hello, Leigh. Hello, Bruce. Yeah, look, it has been a shocking week. The entire game has been tainted by this, clearly the Sydney Swans. But I can tell you today that fresh information emerged yesterday morning. It was conveyed to the Swans. It hasn't been confirmed, but the Sydney Swans have been contacted by a connection to one of the three women who are involved in these allegations. And we don't know yet whether there were two or three women who were hired by the players in that room. But one of their connections has contacted the club claiming to have audio of the women speaking together after they returned home from the Pullman Hotel and talking, just a conversation about where they might take this, what they might report to police, and where this might end for them. Now, this information, or this particular connection, his details have been passed on to the AFL's Integrity Unit, and my understanding is from there, the Integrity Unit, which is headed up by Tony Keane, that might be passed on to the police, who we know were up in Sydney yesterday, not interviewing players, as many have claimed yesterday, but interviewing detectives. Melbourne detectives interviewed Sydney staff yesterday. Now, I'm not saying...
Not the players involved.
No, the players involved still have not been interviewed, which I find interesting. Now, I'm not saying this is going to exonerate the players from what I believe was an act of betrayal to their club. And I'm not saying that I'm diminishing in any way the victims, alleged victims, who we might find have been sexually violated. We don't know. But I do believe that if this audio exists, and we've heard claims and counterclaims in recent days, we know that Sydney is very unhappy with an interview that was on Tom Elliott yesterday on 3AW and are looking at their legal options. We know that the women involved are looking at their legal options. But Sydney believe that if this audio does exist, involving the three women who allegedly
Can I just jump in? So we're assuming this audio would have been recorded by a fourth party, clearly not one of the three women.
Correct.
Without their knowledge?
Unclear. But Sydney are aware of it. Sydney believe it could exist, and they've passed the contact number of one of the connections involved onto the AFL's Integrity Unit. So more to come. Sydney make it quite clear in that none of this exonerates the players from what they did. Their futures remain clouded. No decision, for example, on little things really in comparison, like the Best and Fairest award, but I can't see that any of the players would be eligible for Best and Fairest. Now I want to talk about Isaac Heeney, because I don't think, Bruce and Leigh, I've ever seen a fall from grace like the one we've just witnessed in the recent week with Isaac Heeney. We know his children's books have been pulled from the bookstores. A third publication has been put on hold. His fifth quarter camps that he conducts with Toby Green, the business in Sydney, I mean, they have been left devastated by this. His name has been removed from there. He's lost endorsements. All of this we know. We read that his fiancée has left town, no longer wearing her engagement ring. Isaac Heeney's life is in turmoil at the moment. We know he's no longer available for All-Australian selection. And we say again, this is nothing in comparison with what is alleged to have taken place. And if there are victims here, we understand that is of paramount importance and what we should be worrying about. But we can also tell you that Isaac Heeney did not travel back to Sydney with the four teammates, with Bice, with Jordan, with Blakey, with Warner, who were driven home by Brett Kirk, Sydney's welfare boss. He was driven home by Leon Cameron, Sydney's head of football, and Tom Chadwick.
Why would they have separated him from his four teammates?
I'm not clear as well. One is practicality; they couldn't all fit in one car, and I think that my understanding is that some pretty direct conversations took place in that car on the journey home. And my understanding too is that Heeney is saying that he does not believe he is guilty of sexual assault. But this is going to be something for the police to work out. I make no comment on that. We know that at least 2 of the players have told their managers that they weren't taking drugs. But we also know that one player manager, Paul Connors, who looks after Nick Blakey, was, very upset that Nick Blakey had even been named. Was adamant he hadn't spoken to police, which is correct. And
he was named initially, and then he wasn't named for 2 to 3 days.
I named him initially and continued to name him because I know that Sydney were looking at if they were going to take action, it was going to be 5 players. Now, I don't think Paul Connors helped his client by some of the comments he was making, but I guess he thought he was doing his job and protecting his client, and maybe he was being told things by his client that were incorrect. Who knows? But we do know Nick Blakey was in the room. We do know that Nick Blakey has been suspended until the end of the season, and we read, and I'm really looking forward to asking Graham Wright about this, whether Carlton is one of the 8 clubs, I think, who've been alleged to be looking at some of these players. I'd be really interested to ask Graham Wright what he thinks about all of that. So this is the fresh information that has come to light. It is very difficult at the moment to see how any of those players would be accepted in the short term back into that football club. We know that there were concerns at the start of the year by the coaches about the leadership at that football club, which is why they brought leading teams back into the fold. We know they felt that Callum Mills was an outstanding captain but was way ahead of the next person. We also know that Isaac Heeney is the vice-captain of the club. Now, that clearly won't go on either. But I want to talk about what the board plans to do going forward before we go to Leigh. Can we just have a listen to the varying comments about Sydney's culture from its leaders this week?
The thing you need to understand about a culture is how you respond and the actions you take following being hit. We're going to work through, and as hard as we possibly can, to get the trust back from the community to get to the culture where we're desired to be, where we once have been.
Andrew might be best placed to speak to the culture of this football club because he's been here for a long period of time, but all I can say is that this football club's had a wonderful, strong, rich culture, but we've got a long way back here to rebuild the trust of our fans, our commercial partners, our sponsors and the people that love the Sydney Swans.
The voices of firstly Senior Coach Dean Cox and then Chief Executive Matthew Pavlich fronting the media during the week.
I just want to say first on, while we mentioned Dean Cox, the claims and counterclaims. Now, again, there's been inferences that there were coaches in the room. Sydney are furious about this. Now, denying stuff when your team has done something terrible looks a bit glib, but you do feel for Dean Cox and his assistants, and obviously you've got Mark McVeigh embroiled in the pointy end of a coaching process, a senior coaching process at Essendon. Essendon have insisted to me that their decision to delay the decision on their new coach has nothing to do with the Sydney crisis, the Sydney scandal, so we take them at their word there. But on the culture and on those comments, now, this is a disaster for Sydney, we know that, and we know their reputation is in tatters at the moment because of 5 players. The 2 things they told me today was, one, a message to all their supporters, asking them quite sincerely, please come to the doubleheader tomorrow, because all of those involved were not involved in the hotel in the early hours, the Pullman Hotel of Monday morning. And the people who are taking place in tomorrow's doubleheader and the staff around them, the women and the men, deserve to be supported, they feel, by the club. They also acknowledge that something has gone horribly wrong here. And Andrew Pridham, the chairman, said that, I think, on Wednesday or Tuesday. There will be a board-led, no-holds-barred review into the practices of the football club, of the travelling football club, of the football club at home, of rumours and other things that are starting to emerge. Not the ridiculous stuff that came out on social media or about what took place in the hotel room, but behaviour of players early in the year, of recent years, of players who go up to Sydney and say it's great going up to Sydney because these guys get away with a lot more because they're in Sydney, etc., etc. They acknowledge now that this needs to be completely investigated before they have any hope of rebuilding their football club.
Well, that is interesting. I mean, really, it's what the Swans have taken action on is what happens up until potentially legal stuff, right? So we're only talking about what happens up to that in a sense. But just for someone in the footy community, I find it unfathomable that after round 23, this kind of partying into the early hours of the morning took place. Just purely the football part of it. The other part of it, it's funny, things pop into my mind that people have said over the time. One, that for every action, Alan Jeans, for every action there's a consequence. And sometimes your actions can lead to bad stuff, right? Whether it's on the field, off the field, what have you, you know. And the second one, if you do the crime, you do the time. So whatever happens to you, if you're the problem, that'll take place. And secondly, for this issue, there's no winners. There's only who loses the worst, right? But that's the thing that's unfathomable, that after round 23 in like the team hotel, there's a partying into the early hours of the morning. Just aside from even the women sort of coming in and all that kind of stuff. It's sort
involving drugs and higher women.
Potentially. It's more just the party. Like, in other words, if it was after the last game of the season, the party part of it I'm talking. Partying into 4, 5 o'clock into the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. When the season's still going, I find that unfathomable. I can't understand how players would think that's okay to go and have that heavy party when the season is coming to its climax.
Well, this doesn't excuse it, but the sort of comment was, and this has been reported, that one more game to go, a game that is of little consequence, second place secured, and the inference that some players were going to be rested this week and then they get a week off. So this was going to be their... please, I find it extraordinary, their last hit out before September. On the drugs, so Matthew Pavlich referred that to the police. I'm told that the AFL won't comment as to whether the players have been drug tested, and Sydney sort of haven't either. The understanding to me is that they haven't. Now,
you staggered by that?
Well, if they haven't been drug tested, then there was something wrong with the AFL's illicit drugs policy. I understand it's a welfare model and it needs to be. But given the allegations and given what has happened to players in the past when they've been caught on film, for example, with cocaine, and the suspensions then, I mean, I'm just trying to think of players that have come to mind. Bailey Smith, Shane Mumford. There's been suspensions because of what has been seen. Jake Carlisle, I think that was another one.
Because they can do target testing, can't they?
They can do target testing.
So they can turn up at we know that stuff might be out of your system in a few days, but as soon as the drug allegations popped up... Well,
they can hair test them any time over the next
and that'll show
couple of weeks.
So in a broader sense, Caro, regarding the AFL involvement, is the AFL Integrity Unit, are they allowed to begin their own investigation to run parallel with the police investigation?
No, they don't.
Or they have to wait until the police investigation is completed, whether charges are laid or not? We can't stress enough, there is still, well, as you said, the players haven't even been interviewed by the police yet. No charges have been laid, and we must stress as well, our thoughts continue to be with the women involved. But is the AFL Integrity Unit, are they just at the moment sitting back waiting to be not so much directed by the police, but have to wait for the police to conclude their investigation?
The AFL is adamant that they would never get ahead of a police investigation in terms of findings. But the fact that Sydney have referred this alleged audio, which might not even exist, and there's been, as we said, claims and counterclaims, and there's been people speaking mistruths all the way along in this, from every side, which is my opinion, Bruce. But the fact that Sydney have referred something that may have been recorded to the AFL's Integrity Unit tells me that, and I've been told that Tom Harley and potentially Tony Keane, who head up the Integrity Unit, or whoever else is in the Integrity Unit helping Tony Keane, is very much keeping a close eye on this.
Are you of the opinion that the Swans have been understandably quick to deny, but from unnamed sources there has been various reports about a serious fracturing within the dressing room over the behaviour of these 5 players?
No one's denying to me that their teammates are disgusted with them and furious with them. They denied that there's been a rift between the AFLW and the AFL teams, but we know that, well, I've been told that there are some AFLW players who don't want any of these people back at the club ever again. Now, who knows where that's going to go? But I also know that we are a very forgiving industry, and I've seen people come back from things that I never thought they would come back from. So I'm not saying that this is finished for Heeney, Blakey and co, Warner, Bice and Jordan. But I do know that the teammates, particularly the more, well, there's always the ones who play up and the ones who don't, are just devastated by this. And just like you, Leigh, cannot understand how this could have happened.
Yeah, it's interesting, like in footy, in the general sense of your teammates, relationship with teammates. You're brought together for the common purpose of trying to win games of footy for your club. Now, part of that is representing the club, and this is where you get into representing the club outside the field as well, which is a greyer area. But anyway, nevertheless, I think most people expect that's what you're doing. But I would say this, because these players are terrific players, and it fractured the dressing room. But in 3 weeks' time, when they play finals, if their teammates could have, despite what transpired on this Sunday night party, to help us win a game of footy, that's what a teammate wants from their teammate the most. Can you help us win the game of footy? Because that's what we're together for. Now, this is where what I find not interesting, but disturbing, that the fandom is different. Fans are so invested in their footy club. They love their footy club.
So emotional.
And they're so... And I really feel it's really terrible that fans will get really let down because their club has done something that's embarrassed them and what have you, But teammates from their teammates, they'll get narky with their teammates. But mostly they want their teammates to help win games of footy because that's what their sort of purpose is together.
Well, the accused, if you like, they're not going to be able to help their teammates for the remainder of the season. So tiptoeing into the football side of things, and we're not parking the incident and whatever did unfold in that.
We're a football pre-game, speaking before.
So, Leigh Matthews, you walk yourself into Dean Cox's shoes in terms of how does he try and, not faith probably isn't the right word in time, how does he rebuild the remainder of the squad in that they've got a game against North Melbourne tomorrow we know is a dead rubber, but how does he rebuild this squad's faith and trust and commitment, if you like, over the coming weeks?
Well, his purpose now is to give them the best chance of winning the qualifying final. That's Dean Cox's purpose now. This is the next week or two, not what's going to go on over the weeks and the months, but just in the days ahead. On that basis, you've just got to select players who are injured. They're just not available. So what he's got to worry about is who's available and pick the best 23 of the available players. It's strange how some real adversity can sometimes galvanise. So the remaining ones who are really disappointed, and of their teammates, clearly they will be because we've lost their talents. He's not going to help us.
Chris Fagan made that point last night after the game.
Sometimes it can sort of galvanise the remainder because they're suffering the adversity without having earned it themselves, if you know what I mean. But it's interesting, like in terms of what's going to happen in the game. But I think from Dean Cox's point of view, you've just got to. There are a lot of players injured. They're not available, so you put them out of your thinking for the time being.
Yeah, and obviously, as you say, I mean, three of them in particular are such important players to their finals chances. And again, we say this is secondary to what might have taken place, but they're gone. Don't know whether they'll ever be back. And again, I'm looking forward to asking Graham Wright about that. But in the meantime, I think we're going to learn a lot about Callum Mills and about Dane Rampy and McInerney and Papley and, what they are going to be able to do when the finals begin.